on Indian prices as well. Canadians definitely are going to produce more this year, so there will be a lot of availability from Canada as well as Russia in the coming crop. So I personally feel that this will have some impact on the price in India for the next crop. Now coming to your question of 500,000 tons stocks lying in Indian ports. Well, this surely has created a lot of chaos and mayhem around. All of us have had been suffering on account of this, holding on to the stocks, and really do not know the path from here. Where do we go? But anyway, I mean, this is a call which has gone wrong with all of the trading fraternity, and we need to take it on our stride and look forward. I personally feel that yes, with the tonnages stop coming in the next 3 months' time, as we hear from lots of traders like Chad and others, those who have had been shipping it out from there, we presume that in next 2 to 3 months' time, we will not have any boats coming from that side. So that probably help us to liquidate our cargoes which are lying here right now with us. So but pricing, yes, I feel that in the coming crop, we should have an impact on that, given the reasonable supplies available. And as Mr. Hakan has said, yes, price discovery mechanism will not solely depend upon supply and demand. There are macro issues, currencies and all, and there are so many micro issues in India which actually hamper the market out here.
But on another note, and a more serious one, this is in fact the plight of a lot of the importers. There was an avalanche of peas which came into India, not only from Canada, but also from Russia, from Ukraine, from France, and together with that, and there was a double whammy when the rupee devalued by between 15 to 20% and took the entire trade and industry by surprise. In India, the rupee is only partially convertible, and hence the inflationary effect is lag. So there is a lag between the devaluation of a currency and the inflationary effect to have its effect on the price itself. But yes, this is the plight of the Indian importers this year. There has been fairly large amount of imports, but on the brighter side, I think the worst is over. I firmly believe that the shipments have slowed down to a trickle. The offtake has improved, and we will soon see some life in this market in the months to come. A question I would like to address to Brett. I saw in a presentation earlier by Rob, who said that domestic consumption in Australia is increasing in chickpeas. Is it the same case in dun peas?
Yeah, no, look, probably dun peas are pretty well linked in the domestic market to other feed grains, and so it fluctuates from year to year quite majorly compared to other protein sources such as cheap imports from protein meals and canola meals, etc. But as I said earlier, you know, Victoria's production and so is New South Wales production is predominantly where we have a very strong domestic market. A lot of those peas get soaked up in that domestic market, and we never see them visually for exporting. You have two, as I said, two large splitters in Ward Mackenzie and Unigrain, and both those companies use large quantities of peas for export and also for domestic consumption as well into the supermarkets. So prudentially, we really only have two major areas where we have volume for exports. One is predominantly South Australia and then Western Australia. So to answer your question, it's very hit and miss and year to year, depending on what the stock feed values are doing in comparison.
Right. Thank you. Thank you, Brett. Coming to Chad. Chad, you are the most important factor in terms of size to this market. And you mentioned earlier that the stocks are tight in Canada. Could you put a number on what are the stocks left in Canada, and could you give us some kind of a forecast of how you see your sales of the remaining stocks split up between India, China, Bangladesh, Pakistan, and at the rate at which these stocks will deplete or the disappearance will happen?
Sure. I guess for stocks remaining, was it last week or a couple weeks ago, StatsCan actually just came out with a report of stocks on farm. Their report suggested on farm and in the handling system, there was about 900,000 tons of field peas, so that's greens and yellows, that were still in the system, yet to be marketed for Canada. In saying that, I just got my numbers right here, but in saying that, a usual, I guess, seed, you got to deduct your seed and you have to deduct your carryout or estimated carryout in order to get ultimately a number that is left to market. Roughly, I'm assuming roughly around 2.7 to 3 million acres for new crop, so that leaves us with about 217,000, to deduct 217,000 tons for seed, and then another 200,000 tons for a rough carryout number, which may be high this year, but let's just say it's 200,000 tons. That leaves about 480,000 tons of peas to market, and that is ultimately February forward. In saying that, not to disagree with StatsCan too much, but I think that they made an assumption on feed waste and dockage, which was a little bit on the high side in their report a couple weeks ago. So I am making an adjustment there of about 287,000 tons, going to add that back into the available supply. I don't believe feed waste dockage is that high. That number could correspond into higher exports, and it's just not included in that number at the timing of the report, or their production could be off a little bit and in fact is maybe a little bit higher than what they're suggesting at that point in time. Long story short is, with what we have on the books right now for January, February, that's shipping or yet to be shipped, plus what my expectation or my guesstimate is March through July of what is already on the books for container and bulk shipments, that leaves us with just shy of 400,000 tons of field peas in Canada available for market. So basically that 400,000 tons will be consumed or split among India, China, Bangladesh, Pakistan, and the US. The US to a lesser extent, but with the US situation this year, normally there's about 30 to 40,000 tons of exports from Canada to the US because US is ultimately going to be running out of peas. As Jeff mentioned earlier, we expect exports out of Canada to increase to about 60, possibly even 70,000 tons this year. Not a huge number, but at the end of the day, when stocks are tight, there will be more Canadian stocks flowing south. I guess to break it down, by region specifically, out of that 400,000 tons remaining, as I mentioned earlier, India has taken 630,000 tons to date. I believe that there is still something in there. I mentioned, 900,000 to maybe a million. With only 400,000 left, maybe that's a little bit on the high side. With current stocks in India, probably a little bit on the high side. But I think out of that 400,000 tons, India would at least have to take, or I expect India to take half of that. China could easily take the other half, but let's say, at least 25%, and the remaining 25% would be split between Bangladesh, the US, Pakistan, and basically Cuba.
Thanks, Chad. Just to conclude, just to summarize what you said, you say that the exportable surplus in Canada is just 400,000 tons.
That is assuming the seed number of 217,000
Right.
tons plus a carryout of 200,000 tons. So actually, if we take the carryout to zero, which ultimately will not happen because it's impossible in my opinion, but 200,000 tons is very, very tight when it comes to a carryout, right. So that's my assumption. So assuming that there's no carryout, you're left with 600,000 tons right. to market. So that carryout number is, I guess you could argue, is it 100, 150, 200, possibly even higher if no one's going to buy anything for the next few months. But that's just an assumption I made on the carryout.
So if I'm correct with what Chad is sticking his neck out and saying that there is only 400 to 500,000 tons left in Canada with a shipment period available for us before the new crop of up to July or August?
Well, ultimately, the absolute earliest that new crop would be harvested is late August. Shipment in early September, which means arrival in India, early October at the absolute earliest.
So, ladies and gentlemen, between March and August, Viterra says that there is only 400,000 to 500,000 tons of peas carry out left in Canada. He believes that India should be taking half of that, another 100,000 tons to China, and the balance should get distributed between Pakistan, Bangladesh, and Cuba, as I believe. But now, Chad, coming to the key point, where would you put the prices to move between now and new crop? And I think all of us here are very, very keen to know what the price is going to be starting from March and heading down towards new crop, or say July, August. What direction do you see the prices to be, and what price range would you like to share with our participants here? Right. I think let's give Chad a break. Russia. What is the exportable surplus out of Russia, Hakan?
Well, so I'll give you good news. There's not much left. Now, you were asking what to do with the 500,000 tons that is in India, and Chad says there's nothing left in Canada, so you may just ship them back. Now, the living joke aside, Russia, I think there is hardly anything left in the pipeline, and the feed compound is also changed, and earlier the feed prices were low, and the yellow pea was not working. The price was not working into South Med. And over the last 2 months, we have seen a lot of sales towards the traditional markets. And the supply has been dried out, as well as there has been splitting demand in Turkey for further exports. So that has taken away about 15, 16 small boats. And if I'm to put a number, I would estimate not more than 25,000, 30,000 tons is what would be available for export. But this excluding the vessels that are under loading.
So are there vessels under loading, Hakan?
I believe there are, yeah.
Right. And are they headed towards the subcontinent, or?
Difficult for me to say, because it's a multinational company, so they might go any direction.
Right. Right. Thank you, Hakan. Hakan says there's just 25 or 30,000 tons of peas left in Russia. The shipment, the period that is available for that to be consumed is from March, I think, up to July. So almost nothing left in Russia. It seems very, very tight, and now we need the inputs from me. So what's left in France and Ukraine?
Yeah, to start with the Ukraine, it's the same as in Russia. I would say there's hardly anything left. You could do a couple of containers, but bulk vessels, that's finished. Normally, Ukraine always sells their crop when they're coming in, and it has been sold by the end of October, early November. And after November, you will hardly find any crop in Ukraine. They don't want to keep it, they don't want to like it, they don't like it to keep it, so they sell it as soon as they can. For France, it's a little bit difficult story. On paper, there should be something left, but it's difficult to get your hands on there, because today, with the high wheat price we have seen the last couple of months, with the situation in South America, which had dry weather, then you saw what happened. Then it starts to rain in South America. Then you had the Russians saying, okay, we have a stop in the export. I'm talking about wheat again. So that's why they drive the price of the future market of wheat up, and that's what also drives the price for the peas up, and farmers didn't want to sell. So there should be something left, and if you can put your hands on, you will find one cargo, maybe 2 cargoes, I would say around the 440. Old crop until August. First, the crop in France, the first cargoes you can get is end of July. I would say between the 15th and 20th July from the southwest of France. Then we get your first new cargoes. And that is, I would say today is more or less the same price. So it's hardly any difference between all the new crop first cargoes out of the southwest.
Correct. Thank you, Mies. So there again, there's just one or two cargoes, which would mean about 30 or 40,000 tons left in France, almost nothing in Ukraine. So we are looking at a fairly tight scenario as from what our panelists are saying today. We are looking at anywhere between 400, 500, and on the upper side, 600,000 tons of peas left in all the origins, Canada, France, Ukraine, Russia. India, of course, the situation is different. Over 500,000 tons are left in stock, but we have a quick offtake, and we have till July or till August, or I would say even September, before any new crop comes here. So I'd like to come to the final stage of our panel discussion today. We have got from experts the stocks which are lying in the countries of origin. I would like to encourage each one of the panelists to put some kind of a price range that the peas will trade from today till the harvest of new crop. So can we start with you, Mies?
Yeah, on the old crop, I just said you might find a couple of cargoes at 440. New crop, the range which I said in my presentation, you will have a price which is, no, I just said before already, wheat price plus 100, 260, plus $100 is 360, plus 65 freight. You talk about a down price on the downside for $425 CNF India. That's what I think is on the downside.
Okay.
So on the upside, it depends on the wheat. It depends on the currency and depends on the wheat. But you can go up easily at 475. That's without any problems, I think, today.
So you think that the market in France, French peas is well supported at $425?
Yeah, the range is 425, 475.
Unless wheat collapses.
Yeah, it depends also on the currency. That's very important.
Okay, very clear. Mies is at 425 at the bottom. He doesn't need to. He doesn't know where the market will go on the upside. Depends completely on the wheat. That is the way peas are traded in France. They are linked to the wheat futures, and most of the trading is done in premiums, I guess. Hakan, on the Russian, as you said, there is nothing, but whatever it is there, what do you think they will price it at, and which way do you think it will move?
Well, on the old crop, okay, we don't expect any shipments before April. As I said, everything is frozen right now.
Right.
And by the time we see new shipments, we are talking of April. On the old crop numbers, I would say nominally around $400, little $5, couple of $5 here or there will be the CNF numbers on the old crop. And the new crop will depend a lot, again, on the currency. Now it's the other way around. From 32, it's down to 29.25. So currency has become stronger.
Right.
And this is certainly gonna, bring some resistance to lower numbers. But I would say the Russian peas, in the end of the day, needs to be exported, and the prices in subcontinent will be, basically determining the prices in Russia or Ukraine.
So you maintain that they will be between $395 to $400 as a bottom, yeah.
That's on the current crop. New crop will depend on the currency.
Currency, right.
The overall feed compound as well. I forgot to mention that. Yeah.
Right.
Thank you.
Chad, you're on now.
For old crop, I think we've seen the lows, and in saying that, it's basic result just because of the tight stocks. But on a FOB side, like I mentioned earlier, around that 380 mark Again, one could argue freight maybe by $5, but somewhere around that 420 to 425 CFR India, I think is definitely going to be supported, if not by India, then by someone else, like I mentioned, China or a few other players. Going into new crop, I guess anything can happen. Being this early in the game, I think to support the acreage, as I mentioned, we need to be at least 400. You're going to have your currency fluctuations potentially and outside markets, which may affect things longer term. But I think as we approach new crop, that's definitely narrow in. You know, it's only a $25 spread right now, but I think, you know, to give new crop a range, you know, could you see levels of 375 to 380 CFR? You know, if you're up 35, 40% in acreage in Canada, you could definitely see those levels. Like I mentioned, though, I'm more supportive on the upside because we need to encourage the acreage, and I think we need to be at that $400 level to do that. So I would say somewhere in that 385 to 400 level on the low side, and the upward side, again, you know, outside markets, and there's so much outside influence that could affect the price. But, you know, do you give it $75, maybe a $100 upside on the high end?
Right. Thanks, Chad. So that was Chad, who's put the base price for old crop around 420.25 relative to, of course, if the freight goes down, prices could drop further. And new crop, the range that Viterra has set is between 385 and $400. Brett, your turn now.
Yeah, look, I tend to agree.
Sorry, one second, we have a question.
You said that for the new crop, $375 to $380, given the size of the crop, 2.7 million tons in Canada and 2 million tons out of Russia, don't you think this figure looks too optimistic? Or you are at the peak of the price?
Well, my personal opinion is you need to get the acreage in first. So in order to get the acreage in first, I think you need to set a minimum price, and you know, around that 375 to 380 on the low side, in my opinion, is where we set that. We've, you know, again, it's early, but we've tested that on the Canadian side of things, and producers just aren't willing to sell anything less. You know, rather than, if we're going to stay at that price, rather than plant peas, they're going to go plant canola. They're going to go plant more wheat because there's better alternatives from a margin return to them. You know, with your comment on Russia, sure, if we're going to see 2 million tons out of Russia, and I'm not sure exactly what percentage of that is exportable, but it's a big number. And you know, from that standpoint, if they're a major player, which it seems that they will be, it's going to be direct competition for, you know, to Canadian seeds. So again, it's just my range, but I think it all starts on you need to get the acres in the ground in order to get that production. They're all estimates today, and with other returns out there, you need to start somewhere.
My question to Hakan, out of 2 million tons exportable production out of Russia, what is your opinion that what would be the exportable surplus? Because that makes very important. That is very important because I think this year there was a regular supply from Russia which has contained the price of yellow peas. In India also, and I think that also contained the price of yellow peas in Canada. Because otherwise, if this kind of crop would not have been there, I think the price would have, might have touched $500 because there was only supply from Canada and that was also in sort. So what is your opinion, given the supply of 2 million tons out of Russia and 2.7 million tons from Canada, and if we have a very good crop of chickpeas, then what do you think that, what should be the fair reasonable price for Indian market?
Well, from Russian side this year, as I mentioned, the currency was the main factor to see lower numbers here. Okay, there was a devaluation, obviously, which supported the export prices, and the feed market was very low. You know, Russian peas normally goes to the protein market in Europe, and that market was not supporting. So the numbers in India, these 400-ish numbers, were excellent return for the Russian farmers, and they had a good year. So we saw a lot of quantity moving this side. Now, if with the expectation of a large crop, and you obviously expect a bearish tone on the new crop. But if the prices will go down to a certain level, you may see nothing is getting exported out of Russia.
Thank you.
Any questions, friends from the audience? Yeah, Jairaj, can we have the mic handed to Mr. Jairaj?
This is Jairaj Patel from Haqqan Agro in Dubai. I remember, when we had a similar panel discussion in Barcelona, I had raised a point that the prices of the other pulses, mainly tur or black mape or moong, they were at the time coming down, and we have seen the prices from $1,200 coming down to $600. And I had asked why at the time panel was bullish on peas. The reply given to me was that there has been an increased use of peas now in India. There's a lot of institutional use as well. But what I'm not able to understand, and what I don't know if people here in India have tried to analyze, that this year there was supposed to be a reduction in the production of chickpeas, which was estimated to about 5 million tons. But you had a good peas coming in, you still sit with stocks of 500,000 tons. Why is there still a difference of $300 between the prices of chickpeas and yellow peas? Has somebody tried to analyze that?
This is, you're talking about India, specific.
Specific to India, yes. I mean, everybody here right now is wondering what's going to happen to 500,000 tons of peas and what the prices would be in the coming time.
Would you want to comment on that, Varinder? Why is there such a big spread between the price of chickpeas and the price of yellow peas?
Well, I have been wondering as well, like Jairaj.
Or do you have a poetry on this one too?
No, but the issue is, I mean, maybe the realistic numbers of chana had been wavering all these months. I mean, they have been talking about the crop going slightly, they said that there are shades on the grains, which will not fetch them the prices, and then suddenly they say, no, the crop is fine. So maybe that chana had been toiling primarily onto the speculators' wish. So that is why it has gone to this level. Given the other pulses, I mean, behaving reasonably well, chana really went up. So maybe that has really jacked up, and moreover, peas somehow has become now more or less an inert commodity. It has lost the correlation with most of the things, I would say, in the recent past. Even the Canadian supply and demand scenario does not have an impact on India. The local demand and supply does not have an impact in India now. It has become a fairly inert produce, I would say, which does not get affected. We have seen that chana going up to 300, 400 rupees in recent past, and peas are moved only 20 rupees or 30 rupees or 40 rupees. On the other hand, when the chana falls by 100 rupees, we immediately see a fall of 100 rupees in yellow peas, which invariably happens. So that probably has created a kind of chaos in this market. Otherwise, I don't see any valid reason for this to happen. I mean, normally the gap used to be about 5 to 7 rupees, which has now gone up to 15 rupees, which is unwanted and undesired, I would say.
Thank you, Varinder. So I hope it answers your question. I would like to add that the pipeline for chana was driven dry. You must be aware that there are stock restrictions for chana in Maharashtra. I think there are stock restrictions in Rajasthan. There are stock restrictions in Delhi. These obviously distort markets. Any kind of government stock restrictions distort markets. Bull markets come from supply side. They do not come from increase of demand. The supply was driven dry because of these stock restrictions by the government of India. We have a very dry pipeline right now. We are going into a new crop, but at the same time, we have a huge stock of yellow peas, so the relationship got distorted. And I think slowly we will see that the spread starts decreasing as we go ahead and we come into the new crop chana harvest. I think we need to break for lunch. So just my concluding remarks are, as far as the price range for yellow peas is concerned, old crop is between 400 and 425, and new crop is clearly between 375 to 385. At least that is Chad's wish price, if I may say. But thank you, all of you, for joining in and sharing your views. In particular, Varinder, for that poetical analysis of the trading situation in India as of today. Thank you. Thanks a lot. And thank you, ladies and gentlemen.
It was a good presentation. I just want to know one thing. I mean, you've clearly established the case for taking up production in Africa, and you're saying that there are huge investments which are likely to take place. Could you tell us what is the trick so that we can also adopt the same practice in India, so that our small farmers will also get into pulse production and we can be self-sufficient?
Thank you. That's a very good question. Already in India, I think the smallholder is doing a lot. You have relatively limited land resources in India. You have already intensified. The Green Revolution took place in India many years back, and I think production is already intensified. I really don't see the scope for much more productivity from the smallholder here. It is already maximized. I believe a lot is being done. Perhaps a little more could be done, but largely the potential has already been exploited.
Very important. You said we have about 26 to 27 million hectares of land under pulses. The problem is not land availability. We have enough land available for pulses. The problem is the yield, 600 to 650 kilograms. But our focus of attention should be on raising yields, which will translate to strengthening the input delivery system, bringing more irrigated land under pulses cultivation, addressing pest and disease issues, building rural warehouses for warehousing, etc. I think these are structural problems of the pulses crops, and this is what we need to address in order to raise our production and productivity. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chandrasekhar. Any more question?
Hello. Yeah, good evening, sir. Sir, you addressed about the Africa, which will be in the decade the best source of supply. But what I saw was the focus was only on the 4 or 5 countries of East Africa. What about the rest of the continent, the southern part or North Africa or the West Africa? Because I know that the part of West Africa, that is Nigeria, Ghana, all these countries are importing pulses in a big way. So what is the overall geographical about Africa? Is only the East Africa is important for us?
Thank you. Again, a very good question. The whole of Africa, except, of course, the north of Africa, the MENA countries, the whole of Africa is fertile, and there is potential for them to grow pulses. If you look at West Africa, farming generally in West Africa is quite poor. West Africa is a huge importer of rice and many other crops, but in time to come, they certainly have the potential to produce, but commercial factors, alternate sources of income, perhaps not enough emphasis by government has dictated that they are not planting as much as they could. But potentially, Africa, other areas in Africa have the ability to produce pulses. They certainly have the weather patterns, and they certainly have the land resources. So in time to come, that too is a possibility. Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Thank you. Any other? Yeah.
Are you able to hear me? Of course, I was pleased. Can you hear me? No. Of course, I was pleased to hear that Africa can probably feed the world, and the world needs food. There's no doubt about it. You have also said that 25% of the arable land is in Africa, world's arable land, out of which only 40% is utilized so far. But are you going to give importance to pulses or to other food crops? Because we will be short of food. The world's population is already 7 billion. It is soon going to rise to about 10 billion. And we have to feed 10 billion people. So will Africa concentrate on food production or on pulses production? Is it also, because the world also needs feed. Although we talk of vegetarianism, most of the world is not vegetarian. It's a non-vegetarian. They need feeds, basically. Animal feeds, ultimately. So we need feed crops also. So will Africans themselves, I am doubtful whether they are vegetarians.
So will they grow more feed crops or will they grow more pulses? So far as India is concerned, I think India has exhausted virtually its potential. They may do anything, but there is hardly any irrigation potential. India itself is going to face shortages in food and cannot anymore concentrate on pulses. We need more pulses from all parts of the world, and if Africa can provide, fine. But I am wondering whether Africa is a pulse crop really profitable for the African farmers, or they would prefer other crops. Has pulse any comparative cost advantage vis-a-vis other crops in Africa? In India, it doesn't have. That's my question.
Okay. Yes, typically Africa has the ability to produce food for the world. This is the start of your answer. As far as grain is concerned, yes, grain will be a focus, but pulses grows, somehow it grows with grain because they interplant. First they plant the grain and then they plant the pulses to fix the nitrogen in the soils. So pulses is an integral part. So as grain comes in, the farmers have the ability or farmers have the need to plant pulses to fix nitrogen in the soil. So they will continue, they will plant pulses, but grain is perhaps where bigger emphasis will be. Pulses, it all depends on international prices. If prices stay at the current high levels, if India continues to have deficits, then that will be a driver for pulses. But clearly grain is the bigger demand, and there will be there'll be large-scale commercial plantations going in for grain, and these somehow will have to plant small amounts of pulses to fix the nitrogen in the soil and act as a second crop. But again, the main thing is the grains, yes.
Yeah, I have a question for you.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is Dharmendra Vijayavargi from Vijayavargi Pulses. I'd like to ask you a question, Mr. Patel. Like in your speech, you mentioned that the production of this African region is set to increase like tenfold, like maybe going 10 times in next 4 or 5 years. But at the same time, you say that the exports are only expected to double up in decades' time. So why do you feel that? Like on one hand, you are saying that like Africa might be the bread basket of the world or the food basket of the world, and you don't expect the exports to grow like in sync with the production which you anticipate is going to increase.
Okay, I think when Mahesh stated in his speech that production of pulses has grown tenfold, he referred to from 2005 to 2015. So perhaps there's the answer to your question.
Ketan bhai, this is Pradeep Jindal. First of all, I thanks ETG Group to promote and to become strong and stronger in African sectors. My main question is all the pulses which is importing into India, as per import-export policy, it has to be fumigated with methyl bromide. So far, what I heard, the cargo is not fumigated with methyl bromide. And is there any way out, or is there any ability of methyl bromide? What is the progress for methyl bromide?
Okay, I think there's a separate panel in this conference that's going to discuss that subject, so I wouldn't really address it. But all I wish to say that methyl bromide globally has been banned, and it's a harmful substance, and eventually India will move away from usage of methyl bromide. They have agreed to this.
And fortunately, plant quarantine department is also here.
I think we are going to have a discussion on plant quarantine after these presentations. So I think, Mr. Jindal, you will have your answer. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. I just wanted to also add that apart from East African countries, Zambia is another country that grows pulses. Having said that, I wanted to ask Mr. Patel, you made reference to the, I don't want to say quality, but type of pulses from Myanmar vis-a-vis African pulses. You said they are slightly different. There being an effort being made to ensure that the pulses from Africa are more or less the same like Myanmar, or is it a closed chapter?
I think it's really all about the variety of pulses that are planted. The varieties that are suitable in Myanmar are not particularly suitable in Africa. It's a different subspecies of Tur. But African pulses are really the same. It's been accepted now by most of the millers in the country that African pulses are more or less on par with Myanmar pulses. So it's not really important for the African farmer to try and change, because trying to change a variety is extremely difficult. You take huge risks. The new seed that you bring in could potentially not be accepted by the lands, and it might not give you the same yields as it's giving you in Myanmar, for instance.
Chandrasekhar, for your excellent presentation. Of course, I have really many questions to ask, but I will confine myself to a few ones. Firstly, you said that our per capita consumption of pulses has increased during the last 2-3 years. But if you take a longer period, much longer period, of say last 20 years, then India's per capita consumption of pulses has actually declined. It was as high as about 17 grams at one time. It has come at the actual market price. Actual market price in all probability must have been much higher than the minimum support prices. Government was just only followed the market prices and raised the minimum support prices by 33% and 50%. You have also shown that the increase in acreage has taken place in 2010-11. Well, minimum support prices, you have showed 33% increase and 50% increase over the 3-year period from 2009-10 to 2011-12. 2011-12, the acreage has actually gone down. It has not increased. It is only between 2009-10 and 2010-11 that the acreage has increased. And the yield has also increased between these two periods, not between 2010-11 and 2011-12. So my simple question is, despite the increase in the minimum support prices, why in 2000, what happened in 2011-12 that the acreage has slightly declined, yield has slightly declined, and if this trend continues in 2012-13, again we will have the same thing. In fact, in agriculture, we should not depend on 1-year data. As it is well known, the Cobweb theorem applies. One should always take a 3-year average data to work out the long-term trends in agriculture. 1-year data is inadequate. 1 year the rainfalls are good, the weather is good, the crop increases. The next year the weather is bad, the crop declines. So really speaking, this 3-year analysis is not adequate to draw a picture about what will be the outlook for India in future. That's my main question.
Sir, is it an observation or a question?
Observation is a question, because you have to tell me whether these data are enough to give an idea about what is going to be the outlook for India in future.
Sir, very simply, we are looking at